Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Only Stupid Answers. My name is DJ Wooldridge, and we are here today to talk about Lovecraft Country, Episode 7. I am Hippolyta's relentless search for answers takes her on a multidimensional journey of self-discovery, and Atticus heads to St. Louis to consult an old family friend. And this episode was directed by Charlotte Seiling and written by Misha Green and Shannon Houston. And with me today is Jeannine Brice. Jeannine, say hi to the kids at home. And for those of them that did not see our review of the second episode of this season, remind them who you are, where they can find you, and what you're up to.
I am Jeannine Brice. You can find me at Jeannine Devine on Twitter and Instagram. You can check me out on the Movie Trivia Schmodown on the SEN Network. I am Jeannine the Machine over there. And I do have a podcast feed with my great co-host Morgan Robinson called the It's a Wonderful Podcast feed. We have Machine Mondays every Monday where I talk Schmodown. Every Wednesday we have Morgan Hasn't Seen, where I force him to watch movies he hasn't seen. Mm-hmm. And every Friday we have It's a Wonderful Podcast where we talk old classic awesome movies. So check it out. All places podcasts can be found. The It's a Wonderful Podcast feed.
So let's get into this episode, which does not have any weird monster tentacles. I missed them, if I'm being honest. We're going to break it down into kind of different pieces, the different storylines we have in this episode. And let's start with Ruby and Letty. So obviously, last week we took a detour. We went to the past and we went to Korea and learned more about Gia. So now we're kind of picking up all the threads we'd left off with, I think the episode was Strange Case when we did that. So we open with Ruby now in the basement with Christina, and it turns out Williams and Dell/Hillary's bodies are in the basement. They're dead, but she's still extracting things from them to make her concoction. And what interests me about this is, so Ruby's like, I need you to tell me everything. And their interaction with Christina, she specifically says that even though it was coming out of William's mouth, it was all true to her, which implies to me that Christina might have romantic feelings towards Ruby. Where do you think, and we don't see Christina at all after that, but there seems to be some hints that she did inform Ruby of everything, including Letty and Atticus's involvement in all this. What are your thoughts on Christina and Ruby's dynamic now that the truth is out?
I think they might actually get closer, and I did get those vibes as well. I like that she kind of laid it all out there for her, because she didn't have to take it as far as sleeping with her and all of those things to kind of get that rapport with William, and she did. And it was like a big deal for her to give Ruby that experience of doing things that she wanted. Yeah. She was really open about, I wanted you to have that freedom. I wanted to give you that gift. So those elements definitely lead me to believe in the things that she was saying, definitely lead me to believe that there are some feelings there. And I think Ruby will be open to seeing where that goes now that she knows she's going to have full honesty with her. Yeah.
So Ruby ends up kind of babysitting Dee and her friends for Hippolyta as she goes on her strange adventure, which we will get to. We're going to save the meat and potatoes for the end of the episode. But Letty decides to kind of like put her adventures on Atticus with pause to make things right with her sister. And they have a really a sweet scene, but also kind of like an interesting scene where Letty apologizes for kind of playing her sister. And Ruby gives her a little bit by saying that she never remembers her mom apologizing for anything, so they're not quite the same. But in their interactions, it seems apparent that Ruby knows, and so she's kind of putting out feelers to see if Letty will let her in more on the secret. And I think if there's a connecting theme between this and Hippolyta's journey, it's you should just tell people things. You should just tell them.
Yes, just be honest.
Just be honest. So we talked about how Ruby and Christina's relationship might change. How do you think Ruby and Letty's relationship might change? Because it's becoming more complicated.
Yes. I think this apology is steps in the right direction, but I think if Ruby does know more than she's letting on, if Letty is not upfront about those things, I think that could damage the relationship again, because then she's going to see her kind of lying and maybe manipulating her again. Yeah. So I think she's kind of holding some cards close to her vest. and she'll definitely be watching Letty more to see if she's open with her about things. And I think if she's not, then she might just break it off completely.
Yeah, they're doing something interesting with Ruby, who's one of my favorite characters on the show, and I'm very glad that as bummed as I was that we kind of left like the road adventure setup we had in the first episode, I'm glad we've circled back because it's given a lot of opportunities for characters like Ruby and Hippolyta that would have been like just side characters, a lot of room to breathe. But it's interesting because I feel like saying they're setting up Ruby as an antagonist might be a step too far, but it feels like she might fall into the Montrose camp of it's complicated. And it's a step I like because I think you and I talked a little bit about in the second episode, then the first couple episodes, the antagonists were a little bit one note. And so with what we're doing with Ruby and Montrose and even Christina, it feels like it's complicating that. Do you think Ruby, like you said, like if she's not honest with her, could Ruby be like an antagonist on the show?
I think she could be like, not maybe intentionally, but if she feels like, she was already kind of manipulated by Christina, she was already kind of lied to and manipulated by Letty. So I think if they continually do this after now, they've taken this stance of I'm going to be open and honest with you, and they don't do that, I think they've been building to her having like this built up hurt over a lot of things. So yes, I think with this episode, kind of them both really being open and honest with her and kind of setting up that they say that they're going to be like that going forward and they're not, I think that could definitely turn her into an unintentional antagonist because she'll be so hurt at that point.
Makes sense to me. So the other thing that we get to, I think the first time we see Letty in this episode, she is having a dream that is the same as Atticus's vision from episode 2, where he sees his grandmother running from the building with a book, and we'll talk about more about the book in a minute. But in the vision, she is pregnant, and they lay it on thick that she is probably pregnant. Do you think Letty is pregnant, or do you think this is a feint?
I do think she is pregnant. I mean, the garlic part, like you love garlic, but all of a sudden she doesn't. I definitely think, and very interesting that she was very hesitant to even mention that to Atticus, that was part of the dream. So I'm kind of curious, like what her reservations were for even mentioning that.
When you watch, we also do reviews for the boys on this channel, and in these past 2 weeks have been two similar tropes where if you live in a TV show, speaking of the boys, your head's very fragile. You just knock that thing one wrong direction and you're done for. In this one, it is really easy to get pregnant on a genre show, like crazy easy. Like one or two times you're good to go. Anyway, you're good, anyway, we're not gonna get into that. We actually have a question from Danny M in the chat. Do you think Letty's our true protagonist since she also had the dream and vision? I'm gonna take that further because it did occur to me that last week we'd hinted that Atticus might die, which traditionally is like, oh no, the hero's going to die, and then they make it. But maybe this show is setting it up to where at the end of this season we lose Atticus and Letty and his son, daughter, whatever. Kind of takes the show from there. Because I thought when she had the vision, it's like, oh, she's not having the vision. The baby inside of her is whatever that lineage. Could Letty be our stealth protagonist?
I could see that. I could definitely see her kind of, she's been such a strong, focused character this whole time. And the fact that she's so deep into this now, I definitely think her being able to carry on that lineage could mean, Tick not being here at the end. And, even the predictions about him dying too. I definitely could see that happening.
So speaking of Atticus, let's go on to him. So he discovers accidentally that his dad is gay, or at least his dad, the guy that raised him, is gay. And he doesn't take it particularly well. No. He does not. What did you think about Atticus? What did you think about Montrose with Sammy? Because we get a reminder that Montrose isn't the easiest to get along with.
No.
And Atticus's reaction to that discovery.
Well, I think just in this time, it's already hard enough to be a black man, and then to put that on top of it as well. And I'm sure he's dealt with a lot of kind of being a man and being masculine and things like that.
Yeah.
So whenever he does feel himself getting too close, that's when he like picks a fight or, gets mad to prove something to himself because he has all that kind of self-hate in there.
Yeah.
So it was kind of sad to see that Tick wasn't more sympathetic or understood that, it all kind of comes from a place of self-hate. He kind of turned it around to be like, how it affected him and not really trying to see the deeper side of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting.
That was a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, it is. But it's interesting. I thought the show did a smart job of, there's like 3 levels to it. There's his knee-jerk reaction with a slur, not great. And then he goes a little bit deeper. Like when he was being beaten by his dad said it was to make sure he wasn't like weak, you know what I mean? Make sure he's masculine. So, and that, of course, his perceptions of these things affect that now.
Yeah.
But then the other layer of him realizing that the beatings had nothing to do with him. I was like, okay, so now we're at the core of it, of what's actually bothering him.
Yeah. So it wasn't, I don't accept you for who you are. It's more of what you did to me, and the hypocrisy of all of that is really frustrating and hurtful.
Yeah. So I'll be interested to see how they resolve that. Although I will say, mixed feelings on the arc we're taking Montrose on after he killed the native woman a couple episodes back.
Yeah.
And, you know what I mean? Like the way that goes, like, Then again, Atticus did some messed up stuff in the war. So, we all have our cross to bear, I guess. So now, before we get that, I'm just so excited to get to Hippolyta. I'm jumping ahead. So Atticus, and maybe you can help me make sure I'm on the right track here. So Atticus visits his mom's cousin's friend.
Yes.
In St. Louis.
St. Louis.
Birdie. Mm-hmm. She visits Birdie, who seems very lovely. And she shows him a book where he sees what I'm assuming is either his mom or his mom's cousin, that has a birthmark like the one he has. And he basically, this show will find any excuse for Atticus to take his shirt off. Just take it. And I don't blame him. I get it. But it's on like his back. What do you think the birthmark means? Could it just be like you're part of a special family, or could it mean something more?
I think it might have something to do with, his lineage and who he is. So the fact that like there's kind of this talk of him being the last one, I'm curious to see what that means with other people in the family. So I think it means definitely more than, just a birthmark. I think there's more to it.
I also think you and I speculated in episode 2 that perhaps, obviously, for the evil white supremacist cult, they think his lineage is special because he was Titus's bastard, or however many lines removed.
Yeah.
But we speculated that his mother's line, his grandmother's line, might have been special on its own. And I after this episode, I'm becoming even more convinced of that, because I think I wouldn't be surprised if the birthmark is longer, like it goes further back than that.
Than in the lineage, yeah.
And when they're talking about the Book of Names, it was like, well, the mom was able to do these things that nobody else was doing. It's like, well, okay, so it's
yes. And the fact that she shows up, the grandma shows up to guide him, like there's obviously some power in her side as well. So.
Yeah, so it's Titus ain't that much. It ain't nothing. Forget about Titus. He's not a big deal. Sorry, Christina. You didn't like him anyway. So now let's get to Hippolyta and her magical mystery tour, as I have it in my notes. So Hippolyta was able to open the orrery, and it was funny when she starts figuring that. There's several moments in this episode, like I thought that we'd established that Hippolyta was smart. And now I realize, no, Hippolyta's a genius. Hippolyta's crazy. Like she's throwing around terms that people like barely know now in the 50s.
Yes.
Like
and you can see like the equations popping up when she's doing the math. Like I loved all of that.
Yeah, she's like way ahead of the curve. And so she is able to figure out the orrery. She shows up at the observatory, and cops show up, and so does Atticus. And I love this whole sequence because she's messing with the machine, and then the cops show up, and Atticus is hitting people, and bullets are flying everywhere. Yeah. And it was such an old school like 50s sci-fi movie where the heroes beat people and they're shooting. And it's like I'm a sucker for all this. I love it.
And portals opening up.
Portals are opening. Yeah. It's nuts. So she gets sucked in, and let's go through each of the portals she places she stops in. Her first one is what appears to be an alien world with a building or structure that appears to be heart-shaped. And these two robot-looking entities show up, take her to a classic white room, and she has little gadgets in her wrists. And then she meets what I have in my notes. I could come with a better name. Was Afro Robot Lady, who's my new favorite character on the show, and I hope I hope she shows back up. Once that happened, I was like, oh, I'm so in. The crazier this show gets, and the more it embraces bigger genre ideas, the more in love with it I become. So, what were your thoughts when Afro Robot Lady showed up?
I was getting like these, cyborg Grace Jones vibes from her. I love it. So I was like, who is this awesome badass lady in this like techie armor? I love it. And her just telling her she's not a prisoner, but yet they're trapping her in there and her like trying to work through everything. So yeah, like I was with her, like trying to figure out what's going on. And she was like kind of relaying all the places that she was seeing, like when the portal was opening up. So that was really smart of her to kind of recall all those like flashing images that you could kind of see when the portal was opening. Just her trying to figure it out. And then her coming back and like telling her basically what this is. And she's just saying, I am. I loved all of that and just getting to kind of figure out what we're in for with this.
Yeah. So the first place, once she starts figuring out the idea of naming herself and naming a place, she first goes to almost not lark is the wrong way to phrase it, but almost like not really understanding what situation she's in yet. She names Josephine Baker in Paris in the 1920s, and she shows up on stage in an adorable scene where she doesn't really know the moves.
All the girls are getting mad at her.
And it's so funny because all the girls are mad at her, but they're not even that mean. You know what I mean? Like, as mean as they could have been with that situation, they're just kind of like annoyed more.
Yeah.
So it's all really sweet. And Josephine Baker gives her advice, and it looks like she spends a significant amount of time in that period. What did you think about spending time with Josephine Baker in Paris in the 20s?
That was really fun. I loved kind of the style of it. I loved her kind of getting to let loose because ever since we lost George, she's been very serious and kind of untrusting and really sad and down. So it was kind of nice to see her lighthearted, and we got to see more of her personality. There were some really fun and funny moments and her being a little bit silly. So I did like getting to see that side of her because, since we lost George, it was very dire for her. She was very kind of serious and stoic, and, we didn't get this lighthearted person. So it was nice to kind of see that. And, and it was great to kind of see her also use this as like a therapy moment for herself. And she discovered, they describe her a lot in this episode as a discoverer, and it was about her kind of discovering a lot of things about herself, especially in this first area that we see her in.
I think it's smart that this show, and it looks like it's going to continue as well with this trend, where it takes episodes to kind of focus on other characters, and it allows an opportunity to not only expand the fiction of the world, the genre aspect of it, but because no person or culture or group is a monolith. They're not one thing. And so it allows the show to explore different facets of people on their journey and what their expectations of their lives were and how they might be thwarted by literal events in history or magical things. And so with this, like you said, it is, this whole journey is kind of her unlocking herself. There's even the visual of the key from the orrery that she uses. To the thing is unlocking what she wanted from her life and what those expectations were. And so from Josephine Baker, we go to her kind of her warrior side, where she appears in what first appears to be an African village with a bunch of warrior women, like her name. Obviously, a lot of the fans of this show will think Hippolyta. They think Wonder Woman's mom. Her daughter's name is Diana. Like that's where they'll go. This has very like Amazonian vibes. And I was like, okay, I even in my notes, I was even like past or future, like it could be, we don't know. And then the Confederate soldiers show up. I'm like, oh, we're way off the reservation. I don't know where we are. And so what did you think about that or dimension? Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. That dimension.
because like her next I am was like, I want to kill a bunch of white people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, how are they gonna make this work?
Yeah.
So in kind of creating this warrior, this tribal warrior world, was really interesting take to go. Like, and you know, we see her kind of, I guess in a montage, see her spend a significant amount of time there because we see her hair a little bit longer. So I think that's meant to show us kind of some time passing. And now she's kind of leading. She was training in the moment we met her here, and now she's like leading these women.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just great to see her kind of be a badass, and like the whole battle and chopping off heads. Like I was so here for all of that. I think this was definitely my favorite of her adventures for sure.
Of the little dimension she popped into. I again, I've said it before in previous episodes. I love the show's embrace of graphic, gory violence. I think it's really fun. I think it's really fun. So from here, she gives a big rousing speech. The person training her gives a speech early on in the sequence, and then at the end she gives her own heroic leadership speech. And at the end of it, she says, I am Hippolyta and I am George's wife. And I got excited because, as you and I talked about in episode 2, we were very disappointed with the loss of Courtney B. Vance so early in the show. Yes. And so she is reunited with him, a version of him in another timeline. But it's not all fan service, because she admits to a degree of kind of resenting him for participating in what she describes as making her small. Yes. What did you think about her reunion and her conversation with George?
I think she definitely needed that. And I like that. I was kind of worried that that version of him was maybe not going to respond in a normal way, that he was going to be like this kind of just blank, like Coraline button for ice, like, you know, manifestation of him. Yeah. But I like that he was real, and he like heard her out, and he even admitted that, yes, you know, it was more from a place of her just wanting to be safe, that he kind of, you know, and he saw that in her when he met her, that she was a discoverer and somebody who was very inquisitive and curious. And he loved that about her, but it was more important for him to kind of have these adventures and have her be safe. And he, you know, I love that he admits that he helped, you know, led her into the shrinking of herself. Yeah. And I think she really needed to hear that. I think she really needed to say that, because this is not something she would have been able to do otherwise now that he's gone. Yeah. So I really think it was important for her to have this moment to tell him these things and get that response from him. And I feel like it was a real response. Like, I feel like the real George would have responded like that. Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because I think it also deals with, in a way, the complex feelings that come with a loss like that, because on the surface it's obviously the hurt from the loss, but then all the things you didn't get to say, and maybe how that kind of connects in a messy tangle to other hurt feelings and stuff like that. So you're right. It is a very important thing for her. Yeah. And sweetly, she, you know, gives her hand to George, and then her next jump is to what I wrote in my notes is like a retro sci-fi adventure. Like, they're going to alien worlds in a spaceship, but like it's very like 50s, 60s, like Buck Rogers
space movie.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like her little like skirt has like planets on it and stuff.
Yeah,
and the aliens
little dome helmet, the fishbowl helmet.
Yeah. And so they go on a journey. This is, like you said, this is her as a discoverer, as somebody that's curious, as somebody that's exploring the world. And then finally she gets, at the end of it, your futuristic space Grace Jones tells her that she can be integrated into their society, whatever that means. And she has to figure out whether she wants to be a part of that or go home. What did you think about all that?
I liked that she kind of said home and then thought about it and was like, it's a weird thing to call it. Mm-hmm. Like, it's never felt like home. This is a world that doesn't really want me, doesn't expect much of me, that I've shrunken into to fit the mold of people who hate me. Yeah. So it's weird to call it home. But the only thing that's tethering her is Dee. And like, she is actually in this moment embodying the character that Dee kind of created for her. Yes. So it's kind of funny that like she has to go back to Dee, who created kind of this world for her in the first place. Yeah. So yeah, I liked that, you know, she kind of came to that self-discovery of, you know, how do I go back now that I'm all of this? Yeah. So I think it's great that she had all these experiences to open her mind and see these things and get the experience to now go back and be that bigger person that she knows she is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was definitely a hard decision for her, but Dee is her grounding force, and of course she was going to have to go back for that. So
Yeah, I like that. I like that description of it, and I do hope she goes back with like all the skills she got. So like she shows up like the last minute, she shows back up and she's like taking people out right and left, and you're like, whoa, like all the other characters are like, where did this come from?
Dancing and
dancing and using her warrior training with like a ray gun or whatever. And then Space Grace Jones gets to join in, and it's just they all get to go on adventures together. I'm on board. It is interesting because I do hope she goes back, because I'm a big fan in, obviously in genre stuff, we can have magic, we can have technology way beyond our own, but if you can tether it back to experiences that people are dealing with, and so many people don't get the opportunity, so few people get to go to other dimensions and have space journeys to learn about themselves. Yeah. So this idea, if you're able, finding a way for her to define her bigness in the world that she actually originally comes from, I think would be very cathartic, because I think people today, in so many different ways, in so many, it was one way in the 50s, it's another way now, and it'll be another way down the line. You do feel small and closed in by the definitions the world puts on them.
Yeah.
And so if the show was able to kind of give a window for people like that to be like, hey, here's a way for you to find your inner strength, inner bigness.
Yeah.
I think would be really cathartic.
Definitely. This was a huge discovery of herself, and a great way. Like, most people maybe would have used this for selfish reasons and just kind of had fun, silly little moments, but she took these opportunities to kind of learn about herself and kind of see things in her that she kind of tried to like hide away. So I like that she used this kind of fantastical opportunity to really learn about herself and grow and use it as kind of a therapy, because I think she definitely needed that.
Yeah. Danny M in the chat suggests that he felt a bit like it was her working through the stages of grief, Paris's denial, anger when she's a warrior, depression visiting George, reconstruction being the discovery of the discoverer, and then her final acceptance. She is not the only one that went through the portal, and I look forward to find out more about this. It appears that Atticus went through as well, and he comes back with a book version of Lovecraft Country written by Uncle George, interestingly. And so for the second there, I thought it was the book, like the book written by Matt Ruff. And I will admit, I was a little bit disappointed that it just wasn't straight, like the author wasn't Matt Ruff, and he literally has the book the show's based off of. That would have been trippy in a way that I would have really appreciated. What do you think? Was Atticus's journey similar in that he went to different worlds, or maybe it was just one? What do you think Atticus's journey was like?
I don't know that maybe he was gonna be as into a self-discovery type mission as Hippolyta was. But I don't know. I think maybe he did it as well to kind of maybe find George again, and that's how he got the book. Because I know he like builds up a lot of guilt about that, or maybe to see his mother and try to get answers there. I think maybe he used it to kind of continue this mission and to find answers about things. I think that would be more in line with where his head is at and where his focus is at. Maybe not to resolve internal things that he's dealing with, but to kind of help himself on this mission.
That makes sense.
Discover these things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Atticus is a goal-oriented boy. He was definitely in the military. When we end on a note where I didn't mention earlier, but before she got sucked into a portal, Hippolyta had shot a cop that was working for Lancaster, who seems to be very much set as the big bad of this season. And unfortunately, Dee's comic is left with him with her name on it, full name. Whoops. Where do you think we'll go from here with the cops? The sirens are outside. They know, you know what I mean?
Well, seeing as how they kind of have a hand to play in this, I think they're definitely going to be questioning her and maybe use her because of what she knows, what she's seen, and the fact that like she was even able to kind of get the machine working and understand what's going on with it. She might prove to be useful to them in some way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think maybe that's where that could go.
If Hippolyta does show back up, where do you think she'll pop in? Do you think it'll be like next episode or maybe like final episode within the last few
Maybe
minutes?
a couple, because I assumed she was going to pop right back in, with Atticus, since, we literally saw her kind of deciding to go home for D.
Yeah.
So if anything, I think she would just reappear back home, but who knows? Because I definitely expected her to pop back in at the end of this episode, and that didn't happen. So I'm really curious to see what's going on there.
Yeah. It'll be a wild ride. We only have, this was episode 7. We only have 3 episodes left. We're near an end of the line. So that's all we have for this episode. Jeannine, did you have any final thoughts before we wrap everything up? Maybe something we didn't mention that you'd like to go over.
Just love this episode. And, like I said, I love representation. I just loved seeing Black women, dark-skinned Black women of all body types and, natural hair, just killing it, kicking ass. I love the casting and the respect for women of color that's happening in the series. So that's just something we saw a lot of. So yeah, I really loved that.
Well, and it's interesting too, because Aunjanue Ellis, who plays Hippolyta, she's a woman of that age and that build, and like you said, that complexion. None of that. She would. I hate to say it, she would never be cast as the sexy dancer lady in a 1920s Paris thing, or like a warrior, or any of that stuff. And so it was really cool to see her live out those journeys and see how, even though people like that are not typically cast in those roles, they could 100% fill them.
Yes.
Believably interesting. She does such a good job in every scene she's put into, and not only kind of tweaking her character to fit this new reality, but also having it make sense on the emotional journey she's on.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. So definitely something I love to see.
Another great episode. I want to thank everybody that joined us live. I want to thank everybody that is watching this episode. Before we wrap up, Jeannine, remind everybody where they can find you and what you're up to.
You can find me at Jeannine Debean on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the It's a Wonderful podcast feed. All places podcasts are found. We also have a Patreon at It's a Wonderful One on patreon.com. We do some fun things over there. We have fun Sunday live streams with our patrons. I'm an artist as well, so you get monthly artwork. At a certain tier, I will make you a custom logo.
Love it.
And you can buy it in my TeePublic shop at G9 Design. So check out the It's a Wonderful podcast Patreon on It's a Wonderful One at patreon.com, or check out the It's a Wonderful podcast feed. All places podcasts are found.
And there will be links to those things in the description of this video. So please take a look there for that. You can find me at DJ Talks Trash everywhere that matters. You can find this show at Only Stupid Answers. But on Twitter, you're going to want to yank the vowels out of stupid. Stay tuned for more Lovecraft Country reviews. Stay tuned for more reviews of The Boys and new podcast episodes every Monday. This Monday, I had a great discussion with comic writer Mark Russell that is very pertinent to the things going on in our world today. So please check that out. Again, thank you for everybody that watched this live, and thank you for everybody to check out this video. Please like, please subscribe, please share it, all of that, so we can get more viewers and build a bigger audience. We really appreciate it. And I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.